No one can interrupt my groove today. Been watching gray skies move away. I just don't think that I can lose, and I might just take a cruise and let the sunshine play. Something more, something new, something new.
Welcome, everybody, to a very good Monday or a very good any day. I hope if you're listening to this on Tuesday or Wednesday. We got Drew. I'm Rob. Drew, how's everything in your world, man?
Everything's great. Always a privilege to be back on here with you. How was everything with you, sir?
Everything was great. It was a fun weekend. Mayakoba didn't disappoint. We had a great leaderboard. It was exciting. A lot of low scores, a lot of good golf. I thought. But before we can really dive into that, or let's just dive into it. What are your takeaways of Mayakoba and Victor Hovland kind of pulling away there on Sunday?
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head. For being a fall event, the leaderboard, kind of everything, how it ended up being come Sunday. I know Victor, of course, kind of pulled away come Sunday, but jam-packed leaderboard, kind of the cream rose to the top. A lot of good scores. Conditions were wet. I know ball was in hand for most of the week. But yeah, listen, you give these guys soft conditions on a golf course that's not overly long, and they're going to do exactly what they did. But Victor Hovland winning the tournament back to back, it just shows when he just is such a flusher of the golf ball, right? Like he's that good with the irons. And he was just really impressive, and he made putts when he had to. And he just kind of put his foot on the accelerator on Sunday and left everybody in the rear view. And you just kind of, at this point, it's Victor Hovland's going to be one of those names where, for me personally, DFS wise, I mean, projected ownership is one thing, but you feel comfortable playing him pretty much on a weekly basis because he's going to be around the lead, and he rarely has kind of a dud fall on his face week. So impressive win for Victor, and it was a good tournament, especially for the fall swing.
Yeah, it was great, and we don't have the strokes gained data from Mayakoba, but I would imagine that Victor putted well. He putted really well on Sunday, so yesterday. And when Victor putts well, he knows he's super consistent tee to green. When he putts well, good luck to the rest of the field. But we saw a lot of good golf, starting with Thursday, where it was a peak DFS and betting golf Twitter Thursday. And you pointed out, gosh, Chris, it all started early morning. Chris Kirk birdied that long par 3 number 10, and you called it how difficult that was. But then him and Wise took off, and everyone crowned the tournament. People freaking out. People were, already cashing their tickets, they thought. And man, and look, we have nothing against people rooting on the players that they bet or that you have in your lineups, but
it's entertaining as hell, to be honest with you, to watch. I mean, take for instance Justin Thomas, right? So we're sitting there on Thursday, and Justin Thomas is in DFL, right? And everybody's writing him off. He was the kind of the main name, and you spent a lot of money on him. And for him to go 41 holes and essentially be in last place to be tied for the lead, that just shows you how you can't win it on Thursday, but you can certainly lose it. And the way he kind of held his back nine together and got into the house under par was impressive. But yeah, with the amount of birdies and swings that we have at like one of these tournaments where we're expecting a 20 to 25 par, things change, right? And there's names that we're used to seeing on the top of leaderboards come Thursdays that I can look at that name and I can say that's a guy that's not going to be on that leaderboard come Sunday. It's just the way it is. There's some guys that get out to quick starts. It's sustaining it for 4 rounds, but certainly entertaining on the social media aspect of it to watch the Cash the Wise ticket, or Chris Kirk. He starts out with an ace on his first hole. Right. So it's even, I think it's even harder when we're sitting back and we can't actually watch it like we normally do on a weekly basis with PGA Tour Live. So people are refreshing apps, scores are changing. It was peak Thursday golf there on social media, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and we saw a lot of good golf the other days. Gooch for one had a great Saturday. I think a great Friday as well, and he was fully in contention. Gooch has been in contention, but I think this was the first time this fall swing he was in the final group, so that was exciting. Wolf playing early, the first 2 days playing really well, except for his back nine on Friday. But if he didn't have that 3 over round on Saturday and he shot like the field average for the top 10, he would tie Victor Hovland right now. So I'm sure Wolf would love to have that back nine, or that the back nine on Friday, but definitely the round on Saturday. And we saw Answer. That's what really hurt me. I had the field surrounded. The top 4 guys that I owned in my player pool finished 1, 2, 3, 4. And so I had Cooch at 22, who was, and what I was making a lot of money early in the day Sunday. And what really hurt me was Chalk Answer. I think he finished like 7 under on Sunday. He shot 6 under, jumped all the way up to the top 10. That kind of hurt. But congrats to Victor. Congrats to ticket holders. Let's jump into Houston Open. We're back in the States. We have, and we kind of want to promote it, we have Jason, our boy at FanShare, who does a great course preview. So please go and check out that, read that. And so, Drew, I might just ask if there's any kind of additional thoughts that you might be looking into at Memorial Park here for the Houston Open.
No, and Jason does do a fantastic job. The one cool thing that's kind of just a bullet point of this week is it's technically a municipal golf course, which, when we talk about the world of golf, and I think municipal golf courses kind of have people think of them a certain way, right? It's a muni course. It's not great, but I think it's wonderful to be able to get out and kind of show how wonderful some of these munis are, especially this golf course in particular. And Jason did a great job of hitting on it. This is a week we've kind of gone the last couple of weeks. It's been shorter ballparks. We've been lower scores, and I think it's going to be a nice change of pace this week. It's considerably longer golf course, par 70, over 7,400 yards. So I think we're kind of baking in different things that we did before. And I'm not going to sit here and kill the, hey, strokes getting off the tee, whatnot. I do definitely think, and you know what, this is actually something we've talked about the last couple of weeks where, like last week at Mayakoba, for example, we looked at it like, hey, this is going to be, it's not really favoring the Bombers. However, you looked at the leaderboard, and there was a lot of big hitting guys there. And I think it's coming to the point where every week, regardless of whatever we want to say here, it definitely has an advantage from that perspective. If you're able to hit the ball long, it's definitely going to be in your favor, regardless of the tight fairways or whatnot. But this week, again, 7,400 yards, par 70, going to be hitting a lot of longer irons in. So for me, I'm sitting back and we're kind of thinking they have three par threes over 200 yards. So when we're talking about key stats this week, definitely want to look at that 200 to 225. And there's, listen, 8 par 4s over 440, 2, I believe, over 500 yards. So we know kind of how that lends itself to guys hitting longer irons in. So I've read everything, and everybody's into, of course, strokes gain approach. We'll beat this to the ground, strokes gain putting. But for me this week, I'm kind of thinking that we can rely a little bit on our scrambling and short game, because when we talk about hitting long irons into these greens, and these greens are, bigger than average Bermuda greens, but I think the short game around the greens is definitely going to come into effect this week, that we really haven't talked much about it, right? When you're hitting the ball from 225, 175, 220, whatever it may be in that longer iron range, it's susceptible to miss more greens. So I think that's something we might want to take a look at. But the cut last year at this course is just the second year here at Memorial Park, was 1 under. And so I expect to see something like that. And I believe the winner, Carlos Ortiz, last year was at 13 under, which is completely different than the kind of style of golf we've been playing. And so this is not going to be a birdie fest. You can look at bogey avoidance, things like that. So there's a bunch of different things you bake into it. But definitely I think around the greens, scrambling is going to be important. And of course, it's going to favor the longer player.
Yeah, good stuff. And like you said, I want to point out that this is the second time that we're playing here at Memorial Park. So sample size is very, very small. Yeah, we get strokes gain data. Thankfully, that helps. But again, just one tournament to base this off. So let's not kind of read what happened last year and say, well, this is what you need to do well here to succeed. Yeah, definitely let's use it, but it's not the gospel. It's not something that we're going to say, hey, we have to live and kind of die by it. So one thing I'll just point out, driving distance does it, there's like less margin of error because there was such an advantage it showed last year. But with some of these other statistics, yeah, I mean, it could look totally different this week. One thing I'll bring up is we're in Texas, so the wind's going to be a factor as of right now. Thursday looks pretty windy, and it looks pretty windy for the morning wave. Now, this is Monday night. That is likely going to change. That's what forecasts do, but just something we want you to be mindful of. We want you to kind of to consider. Well, before we move into a little bit of strategy, and we can kind of touch base there, anything else about the course real quick?
Yeah, just to your point real quick, I think it's certainly important to keep an eye on things like wind. We saw how it kind of shook out at Bermuda. When we were on this, this show on Monday, it looked like the morning wave on Thursday would really have the advantage. And it turned out to be completely the opposite. It was a significant advantage to the guys that played in the afternoon on Thursday. But I'm definitely looking forward to this week. It's going to be different. It's going to be longer. I expect scores to be lower, but again, we'll see off a small sample size. But it's nice to have this change of pace. It's a decent field. And the golf course, I think, will show itself really well as it did last year. And I'm looking forward to jumping into it.
Yeah, well said. So good deal. Well, this is very interesting kind of DFS-wise because we get a guy like Ortiz, who obviously played really well here last year, won the tournament, and is coming off a great performance. I think, second last week, this past week. So what is that going to do for ownership? What's going to do ownership for guys like Gooch, who, we kind of really bought in early on him, and it's almost getting to that point of let's sell while his price is high. If he's stock, we definitely made some money with him. And then, guys like Aaron Wise is going to be unique. So there's really, really good opportunities to find leverage here this week, maybe more than an average tour event because of strong recency bias, negative and positive. And we'll get into that when we kind of go into the board. But already just kind of seeing people on Twitter, huge lean on strokes gain data for this tournament last year. And again, we know what happens with tournaments. It says one way, the wind kicks up, it goes a different way. So be contrarian in how you're configuring your models or your lineups. I would say it every week, but this week specifically, if you're reading course reports from, there's so many good ones out there, and you're hearing very similar things within each course report. Well, in DFS, go the opposite way. And so I might say if everyone's talking about how you have to hit the fairway here, I'm saying, well, I'm not even going to look at people who kind of are accurate off the tee just to get contrarian people. What do you think, Drew, or do you have any other strategy tips this week?
No, I think it's a good point. Course history, we just don't have a big enough sample size to lean that heavily on it.
Right.
It's 1 week that we've seen this golf course. And, there's a lot of other times where course history and strokes gain data based off the track comes into play where it's very significant. We've played a certain amount of rounds and tournaments at this course, but you add in the variable of the elements, definitely in Texas. And so it's a good point to, if everybody's looking one way, why are they looking that way? And should we look the other way? Now, sometimes we should look the same way, right? Maybe what they're saying and what they're feeding us is the correct information. So I don't want to say just be contrarian and be opposite of where everybody's at on this. There's certainly reasoning behind what people think, but you got to think through it as why are people thinking this way? And is there an advantage to be gained to think a different way, or where can we gain that advantage? So, all the information's good. And so, but sometimes we can, again, the outside noise can kind of make us form an opinion that may not be ours, and we may not be comfortable with it. There's lots of information out there, and it's great information to consume. But if every single person is on a guy, right? Like I feel like last week, Abraham Answer, he had a great Sunday, right? But Abraham Answer, to an extent, for 3 days wasn't necessarily great chalk, but every single person was on Abraham Answer. So was it the right play? Maybe. But at the same time, if everybody's on a specific key strokes gain data, a certain player, you just got to look at it and say, why are they on that player? And is it worth looking elsewhere and trying to find value when we're trying to build other places? Because,
well, so yeah, I'll say, a guy like Aaron Wise last week, who everybody, after his start on round one, says you had to play him. He was chalk. He wasn't in the winning lineup, even though he kind of finished well. Point being is that when you roster high owned guys, your lineup has to be more perfect because you get less leverage on the field. So that's the point we're just kind of trying to make. And then now moving into this week, we'll just say that, look, there's two guys that people have already been talking about. And that's one of which, that's Brooks, because of his number for betting outrights, 30-1, 31 on Brooks is great. But then people are filtering in and talking about DFS, and people kind of leaning in to read with DFS. And so this is how we kind of want to understand that if it's bad chalk, or where to find leverage. First, people are saying that, okay, we got to play Reed at tough courses. This is a tough course. Well, we have one tournament sample size. I would be willing to bet that they actually go lower this week. The scores are lower than last year. But yeah, it's longer, but is it going to be tougher? And so then we go into a guy like Brooks, who, he assisted in the renovations. He's kind of a big hitter. Well, so these are all just unknowns. Yeah, and if we had what gives us some security that might make us think a guy is a good chalk play is something, back data, back class. But if we're going into guys where there's a bunch of unknowns and we're basing off like, gosh, well, this guy plays well in Texas. Like, how does he play well in Texas? How is that sustainable? In Texas, the winds one weekend could be super high and super low. The courses are, and it just
courses are different too.
Exactly.
Right.
And so the point being in explaining all this is that be very mindful of how you're kind of conceptualizing, or your rationale, or your justifications on why you're playing a guy. And if you're rostering in DFS, this is a DFS show. If you're buying a bunch of shares of a high owned guy, and your justifications or your strategy is some of these just unquantifiable narratives we talk about, and maybe it's not even narrative, it's just beliefs, false beliefs that you can't back it up. Well, that has bad chalk and inconsistencies written all over it. And I think we're going to get a lot of it, because why we're going to get a lot of it is people are going to over account the ability of, gosh, we had 1 year of strokes gained data. And so they're like, we got to jump in all of that. Well, as any kind of research would tell you, that sample size is way too small. We're going to get irregularities. We're going to get insecurities, and let's take advantage of that. So real quick, Drew, anything else before we kind of hop on the board here and kind of talk about some early plays?
It reminds me a little bit of, I believe it was Summit. Remember when we were in Vegas, right? Mm-hmm. And this narrative that Colin Morikawa and Maverick McNeely were members, right? And so everybody's saying, okay, well, they have a clear advantage. Well, we're talking about PGA Tour players where it's not really much of an advantage at all over 4 rounds during a week. And to your point earlier, I mean, think of the optimal lineup last week, which had Danny Lee and Andrew Landry there at 6,200. So there was good chalk at the top, right? And clearly Victor Hovland was that good chalk. However, Joaquin Niemann, who's typically been heavy chalk, wasn't as heavy last week, and then Carlos Ortiz was there. So I'm okay with sprinkling in some confident chalk, but then we got to go with the lower owned guys with like a Danny Lee and an Andrew Landry at the back end. That's how you're going to end up taking GPP down. It's not going to be essentially, trying to find this flat way across as far as chalk's concerned. And for Andrew Landry to be there, and that was super low owned. I don't have the ownership percentage in front of me, but in the back half, if you feel comfortable with the chalk on the top guys, and that's fine. We just got to find the value in the back end, which is something you do so well.
Well, I appreciate that, but you're exactly right. So let's jump in, and we're going to start with 10K and above. Burns the Hatton. Who's kind of piquing your interest so far?
Yeah, well, first things first, it's weird that Burns out of everybody, I guess, is the top dog. And I mean, I guess his recent form says it. For me, in the 10K range, first I would point to Cam Smith. I could read off stats all day long, which would make you want to play Cam Smith. So I'm not going to do that. I will go with Tony Finau for me. More than likely a guy that's a super popular play. I think his game fits here nicely. What he does fits nicely. I know he was somewhat, mediocre in the last start. He really didn't get it going. But out of this range, I feel like some guys are clearly overpriced, right? When you think Sam Burns is at 11,100 and Scotty Scheffler's there at 10,900, okay. again, Sam Burns is a little weird to me. The other interesting guy is Sung Jae. The last time we saw him, he was fantastic. But if I'm looking for a guy or two out of there, I'm going to take Tony Finau. You hit on something with Matthew Wolff earlier. His back nine, where he kind of cost himself the tournament, that's been my hang up with Matthew Wolff here recently, right? It's not 4 complete rounds put together for Matthew Wolff. It's whether it's a 9 holes here or there, it just hasn't been 4 rounds put together as of late. And 10,400 is a lot for him for me. So if I'm feeling comfortable with anybody, Cam Smith is certainly my 1A, and then I would go with Tony Finau.
Okay, I get it, and you're a tough eye on Matthew Wolff. He has 2 top 5s in his last 2 starts. So I get it. He hasn't got the W down, but that's it much better than that. That's hard. And I'm surprised you didn't mention. And Burns, makes sense with Burns. This a Scotty course. The good thing about Scotty doing well last week is, I had him. We had him. The bad thing is he did well last week, and that's going to drive his ownership up a lot.
Certainly.
I'm with you on Sung Jae. I'm with you on Tony. I love Cam. Cam is a great play. You kind of mentioned he's great. We can mention stats. I'm going to mention a couple. These long irons, and I'm going to say from proximity from 100 all the way up to 200, where the majority of approach shots last year came from. Cam Smith ranks in the top 10, when you can combine all those. So really like Cam Smith. If you want a guy that scrambles, Cam Smith scrambles well.
The putter, man.
And the putter. If that's rolling.
Yeah.
So and we want to we don't get the ownership right now. We understand that's kind of judged, but I do think Cam will be popular. I'm interested to see what Wolff will be. Wolff, I even mentioned it in the FanShare article. We want courses where we can take advantage with this link off the tee. That wasn't last week, but it could be this week. So you get a longer course where Wolff can smash it off the tee. Might be a little bit of advantage. We'll see what his ownership is. And then I want to monitor Sung Jae. I think he might be the forgotten guy in there. Same thing with Hatton. Hatton hasn't been playing that well, but over the back class says he should model out here. Let's just go down the 9K range, and we got to talk about Brooks. We're just going to start there. What are you feeling about Brooks?
I mean, here's the deal. Like we've talked, like we've had weeks where we've played Brooks at kind of super low ownership based off the number. Wasn't good last week. Made triple to basically shoot himself out of it. I'm not 100% with a high ownership Brooks. I'm out. Just that simple for me. He just hasn't proven to me as of late. His game's there. We've given him opportunities. I'm not buying into the narrative that he helped, design or redesign the golf course. I could care less about that. And if we're getting high ownership Brooks, I'm out. If we're getting low ownership Brooks, I'll consider it. The course should fit what Brooks likes to do, but for me, more than likely, I don't want anything to do with Brooks this week. Now, from an outright perspective, I get where people are jumping on 30 to 33, but if DFS wise, if he's 20 to 25% owned, I just have no interest. Even if he's below 15, then we might have a conversation. But I'm going to more than likely be out on Brooks this week. What are you at with it?
Yeah, it's going to ownership play. I'm really intrigued to see what it would be. If I had to guess, I think he'd be between 14 to 16% owned. And if that's what he's going to be, which isn't that high, but if that's what he's going to be, I'm still going to fade. He's playing terrible. And he kind of played awful last week. I know we don't have the strokes gain data, but you MC at Mayakoba, that Mayakoba field wasn't that great. The CJ Cup, and he's only gained on approach once in the last 5 tournaments, and that was at the BMW. And a lot of people are relating this to the waste management, where he came off 2 MCs, 3 MCs missed cuts to actually win. But he showed life at the Farmers before that. So he's coming in not great. But if he's sub 10%, I'm going to play him because of the possible upside. But
see, I'm uncomfortable with that idea. So like, not your idea, but it's like to compare it to what he won at Scottsdale, right? Coming in off 2. I can't do that. Like I can't get behind like, okay, this is how he was trending when he won his last golf tournament. I've seen the way he's played. And I just can't get behind it. I don't know where it's at right now. I'm not comfortable now. Yeah, if he's super low owned, then I will take a flyer on him. But I just don't like the idea where, okay, hey, this is how he was trending when he won at Waste Management. It doesn't, for me, I can't wrap my head around that and feel comfortable unless it's super low ownership. I just think that that's a narrative that we're kind of hoping that something that happened in a previous year where the form was completely different than it is now. The golf course is completely different than it is now. It's hard for me to bank on something like that and feel confident behind a guy looking at something like, hey, this is the way he was trending at that time when he ended up winning. The signs for me aren't there. Now, could he have a great week? Sure, but I just don't know about it.
Well, and speaking of narratives with Brooks, what about Brooks trying to change his own narrative? When he was winning majors, he'd go on podcasts and say, look, I don't care. Sometimes I just lose focus, midway through the round. I don't bother. And now he's all coming out saying he's a range rat. Like, all right,
the range rat.
Brooks.
Yeah. Okay, dude.
Brooks. Yeah.
You say you don't even really care about golf, like it's you just go up, show up. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting point.
What about if you had to name a guy or two, who else in the 9K that you maybe want to just touch on real quick?
I'll go with a guy that I think's more than likely going to be the lowest owned of the 9K, and that's going to be Adam Scott for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Do you? I mean, when I'm looking at the 9K range, I think Adam Scott's more than likely going to be the lowest owned in that range. A resurgence of the putter as of recent. We know how good the ball striking numbers are. He hits the ball plenty far to get around this track just fine. The other guys are interesting, right? With Gooch, Wise, Ortiz, Ortiz course history, if we want to play that. I know he won last year. But for me, Adam Scott is probably going to be my play and probably in my player pool out of the 9K range if I was to pick one guy. And again, ball striking is typically always on. The putter's been good. And I think that he can play well in wind based off of the ball striking if that comes to fruition and we do see windy conditions come Thursday.
Yeah, I love Adam Scott, and I hope you're right about his low ownership. That would be a blessing. But you're right; it makes sense because of Gooch, Wise, Ortiz are going to be chalk, so a lot of ownership is going to be condensed there. But if Hatton and Brooks are going to be low owned, people then may go to Scott just right there. But
that's a good point.
We'll see. I really like Neiman. This is kind of a Neiman course, a guy that can get it in the fairway. Everything I've heard, I haven't been out there, so it's subjective. What I've heard is that the rough's pretty penal here. I think it's Bermuda all the way around, but this Bermuda rough is really, really grown out.
Sits down in the bottom too.
Yeah, and so I want a guy that hits fairways. Want a guy that hits it kind of long. I kind of like Neiman. Let me just talk about Gooch. And I was talking with my buddy Andy Lack, our buddy, I should say, and there's not a lot of people I trust more in opinion than his. And we were just talking about Gooch. So I remember talking about him before the playoffs started. I said, look out for this guy in the fall swing. Fall swing came. I said, gosh, I'm betting him. He was at 80-1. People were mentioning me on Twitter. You're saying, oh, miscut incoming. And now he's 9,300. And so I do feel, and I'm getting worried because his ownership will be high. People are going to look at course history and they're going to see two top fives. Well, one of that is not at this course.
Right.
So, but they're going to be like, oh, Texas, he played well here. He played well last week. This may be the time that I let Gooch go. I sell my shares. If he's a stock, I just made a killing and it's time to sell when everybody is buying. Here's a big recommendation maybe. If you want to bet Gooch, I wouldn't recommend him betting at that number. But if he struggles day one, we probably are going to get a better
nice live number. Yeah.
So I am likely going to do that. Try to find a live number I like. But I would imagine Gooch is going to be 15% plus owned. And the word's out. If you haven't played Gooch all season, you're playing him now. Stop it.
You missed the boat.
You're trying to get on AMC stock. After it's time. Yeah, don't be a square. So I just want to caution people with Gooch. He does model out well for the course. He is coming again, hitting the ball the best. But he struggled Sunday, didn't make the putts. That could carry over. I'm a little worried if it's a DFS perspective. Same thing with Aaron Wise. You got to get off Aaron Wise. This is not an Aaron Wise course, not very long. He actually putted incredibly. He's not known for a good putter. Putted well, or at least what I saw on TV. Don't really like that. So I just wanted to mention those two guys. I think they're going to be really bad chalk, and that hurts me to say with Gooch.
You were hoping that Gooch's high number in chalk was based off of a victory, right? He's kind of chewed it, he slowly gained his way up there with his form because he's been fantastic, but he hasn't got the win. People now know who Taylor Gooch is. This isn't like a sneaky under the radar guy. So yeah, it's tough. In the outright market kind of says is the same as well. I know that we're talking DFS, but clearly he's arrived. And Gooch is always gonna, if you're plugging a model, he's gonna be up top. Everything based off of maybe the putter, or really off the tee, I guess. But yeah, it's tough. Yeah, for him if he's high on like that. And then you hit on Joaquin Niemann, which is interesting to me real quick, is a guy that hits such a low penetrating ball flight. If there is any wind, if there is a guy that you think is a course for the course of a Texas track, right? I think it's Joaquin Niemann. So something to look out for. And again, Niemann is a guy that a lot of people play from week to week, it seems like. And I think unrightfully so. There's a lot of weeks where I'm surprised his ownership is where it is, but I do think that this is definitely a week where he does play well, and a lot of the things his game does and the way that he controls his golf ball kind of fits the narrative of this week.
Yeah, and I will just say one thing. From when I checked the weather, we're not going to get rain very much at all. I don't think it rained that much this past week. So it could get fast and firm with some wind. So just kind of consider that. But let's go down to the 8K range. This is 8K 7 range and below. I get excited about it. Who are you liking in the 8K range?
And I want to ask you about this guy first. Because I think a guy that's probably going to be relatively low owned is Jason Kokrak. And Jason Kokrak checks a lot of the boxes for what I like this week. He's been bad recently. I mean, we remember what it was at Summit Club. He was in last place for a lot of that. But you look at proximity numbers with the long irons, you look at driving distance, you look at the putter. Jason Kokrak, to me, checks a lot of boxes. Now, if that ownership's low, I will be playing Jason Kokrak regardless of kind of the way he's trending into this tournament. Where are you at with Jason Kokrak? And he's sitting there at 8,800.
Yeah, I think he will be low owned, but I'm not going to touch him, unfortunately.
Fair enough.
But I'm wrong a lot. Doesn't mean he's a bad play, but he probably won't make. I actually love the guy right below him, and that's Mark Leishman. And so, speaking of a guy who can kind of crush it with the long irons, that's Mark Leishman. So proximity from those ranges we mentioned earlier, Mark Leishman is in the top 5 in that. So really love Mark. He models that well. Texas Aussie, parallel
low ball flight.
That's right. People Golf Channel are going to bring it up likely with Adam Scott or Jason Day or Mark Leishman. One of them is playing well. They're going to bring up how Aussies do well in the wind and in Texas. So I really like Leishman, and I actually really like Bez right below him. But Bez is one of the most talented players. Underrated on the PGA Tour. I know the Euro Tour is maybe a step down, but this guy has a ton of talent, and another guy who kind of can kill it with the long irons from within the proximity number. So I really like those two. Any other guy that you like in the 8K?
Yeah, and for Bazzuto, we actually get a reasonable number to play him this week. Like if you remember, like he's been pretty high up in the 9Ks. I think his numbers made it playable there at 8,600. I've been big on Seamus Power, and I'll probably play him again. But I'm not going to kill it again because he's basically the guy I bring up every week. And by the way, he's been fine. He's not been phenomenal, but he's made cuts. He's been there. Max Homa is the interesting one for me. Not a lot of things strokes gain wise pointing to the fact that he's going to play well. He hasn't played in a while. So we don't have trends to necessarily go off, but at the bottom of the 8K range, right there at 8,000, I'm interested in that play. We'll see how Max Homa does seem to be a more of a popular player on tour. So we'll see what ownership looks like, but Max Homa has a solid game all around, and I think that's definitely going to be beneficial this week. Strokes gained tee to green. He's pretty solid. So I will consider playing Max Homa. Just we'll see where the ownership's at. But listen, I thought about Maverick McNeely. He had a fantastic Sunday last week. We'll see where that's at. But there's only a couple guys that I feel real confident in taking a look at when player pool comes out here in the 8K range. It's just an interesting price range for me. I really want nothing to do with Russell Henley. That's just me personally. I know that Russell Henley will model out like he does every week. But yeah, so the 8K range, I'm gonna just keep an eye on. I'm not a huge fan of what I see in the 8K range.
There's a guy right before Max who I think is gonna go very low owned, and I think he could be a very, very sneaky play. If we're looking at ownership projections, and if he's below 10, which I really think he will be, Lanto Griffin is really interesting. So remember that name. I might bring him up again on Twitter this week if the stars align with ownership and a couple other plays. But let's move into the 7K range. We get a low, salary sinking with Mito, who is everybody's Cinderella. Now, it's midnight is come and gone, and a lot of people are over Mito now. Well, who do you like in the 7K range?
Yeah, so it's interesting you bring up Mito. He's kind of fallen off. Like last week was just not a very good week for him. I believe he missed the cut, if I'm not mistaken. I'm interested in Ramey playing him again. Right there at 7,500. It's interesting to me. He's a guy that I'll definitely look at. So for the 7K range, what's interesting to me is a guy that I think is going to go super low owned, and I've played a lot of because he models out extremely well, is Adam Schenk. That'll be one guy that I'm playing. The other guy that I'll play, it's another guy right at 7K, is Keith Mitchell. And Keith Mitchell's extremely volatile when we talk about a guy who we're playing, but he's first in strokes gained off the tee. Bermuda's his best surface. Of course, he's 11th in driving distance, hits it long. He's good off the tee. He can get it going really at any point. We've seen him make 8 birdies in a row. For 7K, I'm willing to take a flyer on Keith Mitchell this week. And again, Adam Schenk, tee to green is somebody that I like. And if I can get him at 7K instead of, at the upper 7K or lower 8 range, which we've seen him here recently, then I feel pretty comfortable with that.
Yeah, I like that Ramey call too. I'll go back to him. I'm going to mention a few guys. Mito's ownership's likely going to be low or lower, I should say. I'm going to go back to him. EVR is very interesting. As the more I look into all this, I really like EVR. I think you should go back to Woodland if you played him last week. Jonathan Vegas is another guy that he's going to model out well, but he performs a little bit better than Henley. Cam Davis been off for a few weeks, didn't perform well at the CJ Cup, but if you want that length, hey, here's Cam Davis at 7,400. A little bit of a salary drop from when we saw him earlier in the fall swing. Jason Day, last year in this tournament, he had a really bad round 4. If he just shot, I think the stroke average was, 3 or 4 under par for the top 15. If he just shot that, he's 1 or 2 behind the leader. So Jason Day is interesting. Grillo's always going to model out, but there's 2 guys at the bottom of the range, or I guess I should say 3. But I'm going to Charlie Hoffman. Time to go back to him. CT Pan, you're not going to hear that name, and then Taylor Pendrith. Just like we saw in Bermuda, we know how good off the tee game is with Pendrith. Yep. Yeah, last week wasn't really a good course for him. Now we get to a course that's going to be pretty nice for Pendrith. Ches surprisingly models out well here as well. So there's a lot of guys I like in the 7K. Anything else before we move on down to the super fun range?
No, it's just one thing from like a golf perspective that I with Pendrith last week. Anytime that you play in extremely windy conditions, it actually has a tendency to kind of get your swing out of whack to an extent. And I'm not saying that that's where we're at with Pendrith, but it's interesting to see guys like he really, really struggled on Sunday. And that wind gets your timing and kind of where you're getting the golf club as far as getting it on playing correctly. I'll be interested to see how he plays this week. I'm not saying that the wind did that, but it's something to keep an eye on when you see guys that struggle in windy conditions, it's easy to get your golf swing kind of out of whack, and then you have to hone it back in. The wind whipping, you get in positions that you don't want to. You try to go at it a little too hard. You're just trying to basically you fight your rear end off out there and try something and find something. So we'll hope that his game shows back up this week. But that's always something I find interesting. Again, it's not something that we can necessarily, maybe I'm sure we could throw a number on it if we did the research, but that's always something that guys coming off super windy weeks where the game's really tested. It's interesting to see how they bounce back, especially a young player like Pendrith.
Yeah, and the harder your swing, the more spin you can kind of put on the ball. And if you have some spin on the ball in the wind's just going to grab it. So, and not to get off subject, but yeah, that Sunday in Bermuda when I was, obviously I was sweating that Pendrith outright.
Yeah.
He was swinging hard to do these hard knockdown shots that just looked like he was not comfortable with. And yeah, it just was coming up way short, way long, right and left, obviously. But let's go down to the 6K range where there's a lot of guys that I like. But let's start out with you, Drew. Who are you liking in the 6K range?
Yeah, I'll throw two names at you, and then I'll let you kind of take things over. I'm going to go back with Denny McCarthy. 6,600. He does a lot of things well, right? He's 8th in strokes gained putting. He's 8th in strokes gained short game. So he's does a lot of the things that we like this week. Bermuda's his best surface. He had a good week last week, too. I believe he was in the top 20, 15, 17, something around those lines. So at 6,600, I will go with Denny McCarthy. He's a beautiful lineup kind of filler, right? He at 6,600, he gives you the opportunity to play some more people that you kind of want to get into the lineup. And then I'm going to go off of the beaten path here and take Jason Duffner. And you can argue with me, well, hey, Drew, he missed his last cut. Game's been up and down. That's fair. However, statistics in the last 5 that he's played are actually better than you think. He's right around gaining 3.5 strokes gained total. Before the missed cut of Bermuda, he had made 5 cuts in a row. So his game's is kind of been there. And we always talk like we don't want to just take 1 week and that week be, the end all be all. I'll take that 5 weeks of solid golf over the 1 week and call the 1 week the outlier. So at 6,300, I will take Jason Duffner, and plus I just love Jason Duffner. So I'm all in on Duff Daddy at 63, and I'll take Denny McCarthy at 66.
Yeah, I'm actually with you on Jason Duffner. He kind of models out well, as we say, and I think we'll be low owned. People will see that miscut. Yeah, you got to mention Luke List. It's sick. I get sick kind of mentioning him because models out well, can't putt. Aaron Rye, I've been riding him the last couple of weeks. They worked out kind of last week. I think we go back to Thigala. He did not play well in Bermuda. I mentioned it on the FanShare article because he has such great upside, but he's a guy that likes to move the ball a lot. And I mentioned this in the article. So, and the wind, we just talked about it. If your ball flight has a lot of movement, the wind's more likely going to grab it with that spin. So if there's less wind this week, I actually really like Thigala. Sink is actually kind of getting back into some nice form. If he can just keep it straight off the tee, Sink
he's sneaky long too for his age. Sneaky long. And
then I'm going to get my toot my own horn. I was on James Hahn last week, worked out. I think we go back to James Hahn, and I'm going back to Hudson Swafford. Swafford almost did it for me last week. On Sunday, he was like 7 under through 13. And then finished with 3 birdies. He was in the top 10 at that point. He's like 7th and kind of went all the way back. I had a lot of Hudson Swafford, and gosh, it was looking good early Sunday. And the last guy I'm going to mention, actually there's 2 guys because you mentioned Duffner. Andrew Putnam is really interesting. I like him. And then a guy I think you've kind of been playing a little bit is Adam Svensson. Models out well, kind of makes a lot of birdies. And I will just say, go back to Jimmy Walker. I was on him big time, let me down, struggled off the tee last week, but get him back in Texas. I really think it's not time to jump off Jimmy W. He's almost minimum price. I'll be going back to Jimmy Walker. Well, Drew, anything else before we close the books on the Houston Open? We only got 2 more tournaments left before we really shut things down. So if you got DFS goals, you got to make it happen this week or next.
No, absolutely. It's fun. I'm excited about this tournament. Again, for me, being the golf nerd, I think it's cool that they're showcasing a municipal course. I know it was here last year. It's going to be, excuse me, it's going to be a different test. We've been on Seaside the last 2 weeks. This is kind of more entry. And the thing that I love about Texas and their golf courses is they lend yourself, and trust me, I was a PGA pro. I was a head professional in Dallas, so I know me some Texas golf. The courses lend themselves to creativity, whether it be around the greens, whether it be trajectory wise. It's fun golf. It's not the most normal thing. You're going to see more putters from, off the greens. It's a different kind of thing than we normally see on a week-to-week basis. Of course, we see our Texas, courses, but I just love the creativity that goes into this, and I'll have a lot of fun watching it. And I'm happy that we can watch it this week as strokes gain data's back, PGA Tour Live's back. So that makes me excited. Yeah,
me too. And we'll be going back to a lot of showdown stuff now that we get some data that's helpful. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this. Hope this podcast finds you well. I really hope it does. Hope you're doing all right. Hope you're going to have a great week and an even better weekend, that you're cashing a lot of tickets and seeing the green in DFS. So absolutely. On behalf of Drew and I, we appreciate y'all, and good luck this week.